10. Right. So we've got the front piece and the back piece of our panelled skirt, which is just a slightly altered version of the standard tailored skirt block that you have in the book, the Winifred Aldridge book that we usually use. So let's just start with the front piece. Doesn't really matter. The only thing that is really different between these two pieces is the depth of the dart here. So the back's obviously got a deeper dart. We're only going to be going to this line here, and the front dart stops, it's much shorter. So let's start with the front. I'm going to save paper. So just going to trace it off, same as before, and we're going to be following the complete outer edge. So I know there's also some markings inside where the pattern has been shifted, opened out, but we're going to be using the outer line. So I'm just going to trace this off. So I'm going to put my mark at the top, mark at the bottom, because my centre front line is always going to be straight. And then I've drawn a straight line on the bottom here, so I'm just going to mark the front and the bottom there. And here, just going to mark the corner. So I've got a cross at my corners, that's what I want to achieve. And this has got a bit of a hump in it because of the dart. And this is curved at the top by the waist because it's been opened out. So it's created a nice curve. So you would use a curved waistband probably on this. Mark in my dart. And I'm going to mark in the bottom here as well as a cross. So it creates one point. And I'm going to mark in my dotted line there. Obviously this panelled skirt pattern has got a division line all the way down from the bottom of the dart to the bottom of the skirt. So this is the line we're going to be using to split our pattern into two pieces. So I've marked the bottom of my dart. I'm going to mark the bottom of the panel here. And any lines that we have, we can use as notches. And then I'm just going to follow the side seam round. So this is a really, really similar theory to the princess seam. We're just eliminating the dart and creating a seam instead. Okay, I'm going to mark my grain line as well, which again follows the centre front exactly. So if it wasn't there, I'd be able to find it anyway. And that is all my information transferred. So, let me get my pen. Mark in my straight lines first, which is the centre front and the bottom at the moment. And we actually know that this is going to be a right angle at the bottom here, so I might as well use a really straight line there. So I'm now going to mark on my grain line as well while I'm using my ruler. And I'm going to join the bottom of my dart where I've marked this cross to the bottom of the panel, which is also happens to be a straight line, the same angle as our centre front and our grain line. So that's all good. So I'm now going to join the dart to the crossed point, or the top of where the panel is, really accurately. And then I'm going to draw in the rest of my slightly curved lines, not forgetting my notches. Okay. And remember also that the centre front at the waist is going to be a right angle too, so that when you're sewing it together, or if you're cutting it on the double, there's no point, it's just a straight line. But then it starts to curve here a little bit. And then we've got, and then this side seam is quite curved as well. Alright, so I've traced over all my information. I'm just going to cut it out now. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick picture of this so I can make a little PDF of the process as well. So all we're doing is getting rid of this dart and replacing the whole thing with a seam. So obviously this, you could do this by tracing off both pieces again. So tracing off this piece and tracing off this piece and eliminating the dart. But because it's quite a small curve here, as well, the point isn't very big because the dart isn't very wide and it doesn't extend very far, I think you can probably safely do this one just by cutting through, starting at the outer edge of your dart closest to your centre front, and just carefully cutting down this line. And it is important that you are being very careful when you do this, especially if you're not tracing off the pieces. In fact, I would probably trace them off. I'll trace them off as well, just so that we've got both. But you're going to end up with two pieces looking a bit like that. I'm just going to trace off the two separate pieces actually now as well. So we've covered our back. Weight back on. So I'm going to create two separate pieces without cutting them first, so that I can get nice smooth joins here, and then we can add seam allowance and then cut them out. So I'm going to leave enough space for both pieces. So that's the bottom of my panel again. Just going to mark a little bit along this line, and it's coming all the way up to this cross here, and then following the outer edge of the dart. Crossing at the top here, marking my notches. Crossing again at the bottom. So we've got points of intersection, so it's really clear where exactly we should cut or where the corners are. Okay, so I've marked on I'm going to mark on this point here too, so that I've got a notch between the two parts where they're going to be sewn together in the middle. So you can add as many notches as you like, but I'm going to add one there. We've already got the bottom of that dart there. Okay, so maybe I'll just add another one here for fun. All right. So I'm going to draw my bottom line on this time first. And then I'm going to need to use my curved, either flexi ruler or French curve, because all of the other seams are now curves. So I'm going to start actually with our new panel seam, where we're going to have to put seam allowance. And that starts with the top of the dart on the left-hand side of it and follows through. So we just want a nice smooth line that intersects the bottom of the dart and then carries on straight down the middle. Okay, so I now know that actually that is going to be a straight line from that point on. Pretty much, yeah, so it's gone a bit curvy there, but I will just eliminate that. So that is too curved, so I'm just going to scribble that. Mark in my notch, so it makes it easier when we're sewing together. That was the bottom of the dart here, but now we've just got one side. And now I'm just going to do the rest of the side seams. I'm sorry if you guys are talking to me, by the way, but it was echoing back to me if I have my volume up, and I wanted the video to be nice and clear. But you can ask me any questions as soon as I'm finished. And that waistband is slightly curved. Yeah. All right. So now we've got one panel. So we're going to call this our front side. So side front, we could put SF. One thing that I didn't put on was the grain line, but we know that that is, from earlier, we know that that is the same, on the same plane as your centre front and also that panel divide. So I'm going to draw my grain line on now using my grading square. So I'm just going to put that on my panel line, which I know is straight. So this is my side front, and that's our first piece. Now we've got to trace off the next piece. I'm going to leave enough space to add seam allowances. So I'm going to put this here. Weight goes back on. Mark the bottom of the panel again, and I'm going to do a few markings along the way as well. All the way up to the bottom of the dart again, which I'll cross, and then I'm just going to curve my right side of the dart this time, and then mark my waist and the centre front back in, just with a top and a bottom. Make sure I've marked the other corner as well, and I'll mark my grain line now too, seeing as I've got it there. All right. So I know my centre front line is going to be straight. And I'm going to draw in my bottom line too. And then my grain line. this is at a right angle, the waist to the centre front, so I'm going to draw that in properly. And then it just, the curve there is very minimal, but I'll draw that in. And then we're going to use our curved surface to make a nice smooth line round from the right hand side of the dart to the bottom of it, and then carrying on smoothly to the panel line, which we can then join with our ruler, as long as it's nice and smooth. So that looks pretty good. So now we're going to add seam allowance for this, obviously because it's continuing down. I mean, I'm sure using 5 cm seam allowance would be fine, but I think for the purpose of this one, a centimetre is good. So you just need to add a centimetre all around, apart from obviously on your hem, where you would probably need to add at least 5 centimetres, 4 centimetres, depending on how you're going to finish it. So on the waistband, let's add a centimetre. And again, because it's a curve, I'm just going to mark it in slowly. And then all the way down to the bottom. This is the centre front piece. So that's got my centimetre on. And then obviously you might add 4 centimetres or whatever the depth of the hem is, but I'm just going to put 1 centimetre on for now, because obviously this is a small pattern. This isn't a real size, so we don't need to waste the paper. Now I'm just going to follow the curve of my side front piece. And follow it again along the side seam, making sure that I mark on all my notches afterwards as well, and all my information. So how many I'm going to cut, if it's cut on fold, which it's not because obviously we've just made a new panel so that it's in 2 parts, so there will just be cut times 2. Adding a seam allowance onto your new seam as well, in a nice slow way, so that you're getting the centimetre as accurate as possible, because if you were to change the seam allowance in one place, then it would affect the fit of the garment, obviously. So now I've got 2 pattern pieces. I'm going to cut them out. Actually, just going to make sure I've marked my notches. So I actually didn't do that on this piece, so I'll just lay it back on. Okay, so they are. Oh, I lost my tracing wheel. Okay, so I've got marked a notch there and I marked a notch here, so I know they're going to go together, both pieces still. There's my other notch. And there's my other notch. Alright, so I'm going to cut times 2, cut times 2. And they're ready to cut out. And you'll notice that I haven't completely drawn my seam allowance line on because I'm going to use my scissors as my guide for joining them together carefully. And try and do a nice smooth line and follow this nice curve on the waistband. Side seam. And then obviously you can clip out your notches. Actually forgot to mark there's my side seam notches. And a little curve. Very careful. So we end up with these two new pattern pieces with notches guiding us for how it's going to still go together. So there we are. So the dart has been taken out and we've got two smooth surfaces that when you put them together on top of each other, they're going to go together perfectly. So if you were going to sew straight up your centimetre seam allowance to the waistband, you would then have a lovely shaped waist without the dart. And that is how you do it.